Welcome to the Kitsap Publishing Deep Dive podcast with myself, Jack Bennett, and Emily Waters. Join us as we explore books, current events, history, politics, health, and more. Let's dive in.
Okay, so getting right into it, these chapters from Left in Philadelphia, there's something else. I mean, just take a look at this opening line. What you are about to read is completely composed of instances made from fiction. And I love this part, but every single word is fact and formed from authentic thought.
Whoa.
Talk about a head scratcher right out of the gate.
Yeah, it's like, what am I even supposed to do with that?
Right. It's like the author is like daring us to figure out what's real, what's not, what even is real, you know?
Definitely a bold way to start a story.
It really is. And it gets us right into that existentialism vibe, you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
This whole idea that maybe there's not some big plan, some meaning of life handed to us, like on a silver platter. It's about us to figure it all out, which honestly can be kind of freeing, but also super overwhelming.
Absolutely. And then we get to meet Eli, our main character. He's got family stuff, school stuff, relationship stuff, pretty standard human experience there. But it's the way he deals with it all, or maybe, like, doesn't deal with it all, that I found so interesting.
Yeah, it's that learned indifference that he keeps talking about, right?
Yeah.
Almost like he's trying to convince himself and us that he's got it all figured out, that he's above it all. But I don't know, something about it feels like a defense mechanism. You know what I mean?
100%. Like, he's built up these walls to
Yeah.
protect himself from feeling too much.
Exactly. And it's something we all do, right? Maybe not to the same extreme as Eli, but I think about it. Haven't you ever avoided a tough conversation or pushed away someone you might have actually liked just to avoid, like, the potential for heartbreak?
Oh, for sure. I think that's what makes Eli's story resonate, even if he can be a little frustrating at times.
Totally. He's like holding up a mirror to those parts of ourselves we don't always like to admit are there.
And then there's that whole thing with his sister Diana. Their relationship just, like, screams this tension between feeling and not feeling, you know? Like that scene in chapter 2 at the creek
Yeah.
with all the wildflowers.
Oh, yeah.
She's trying to, like, appreciate the beauty of it all, and he calls it a waste of time.
Oh.
I know, right? It's like he's rejecting anything that doesn't have a practical purpose.
Yeah, and it's so subtle, but in that one little interaction, the author, they kind of lay the groundwork for their whole dynamic.
Right, like their journeys are splitting off in different directions right then and there.
Exactly. You've got Diana searching for meaning, for connection, and then you've got Eli building those walls higher and higher, convinced that detachment is the only way to be free.
It makes you wonder if true freedom is even possible when you're so busy trying to feel nothing at all.
Right. Because even though he says he's mastered this indifference thing, you start to see the cracks, especially in his relationships with Kel and Abe.
Oh, those are fascinating. I love how those relationships weave throughout the story, these glimpses into his past.
Yes. Like little puzzle pieces.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they show us that he wasn't always like this, you know?
Right. Like he wants us to believe he's always been this way, but then you see how much this connection's actually meant to him.
Yeah. It's in the way he describes his memories, like that scene in chapter 6 when Abe asks him to go to the mall.
Oh, what'd he say? Something.
It intrigued me at this age, like as if he's surprised by his own capacity for friendship.
It's almost like he's forgotten how to be a friend, you know?
Right. Or maybe he's scared to be one.
Maybe a little of both. And the way the author uses those sensory details, the way Abe's blue eyes and that sandy blonde hair are described, the feel of the worn-out fabric in Ebb's car, even the taste of those sugar cookies they always used to get at that coffee shop. It's like through those details, we can feel how much those moments meant to him, even if Eli himself tries to downplay it.
Totally. It's like these flashes of vulnerability, and then he just, like, shuts down again.
Like he can't quite escape those moments of genuine connection, no matter how hard he tries.
He almost seems scared to let anyone in. Like he truly believes that feeling nothing is the only way to protect himself.
It's heartbreaking, really, because you can see how much he craves connection, even if he doesn't want to admit it.
It's like he's afraid of what might happen if he actually lets himself feel something, you know?
Absolutely. And it's not just romantic relationships, right?
Right.
We see this fear of vulnerability in, like, everything. His family, his faith. It's like he's searching everywhere but inward for some kind of answer. And speaking of faith, that whole part in chapter 7 where he's talking about his crisis of faith, man, that hit hard.
Oh, totally. Like that moment when his grandfather gets sick and his whole world kind of shifts.
Right.
It's like he realizes that nothing is guaranteed, not even the things you believe in the most. And that's a lot for anyone to process, especially someone like Eli who, well, let's just say processing emotions isn't exactly his forte.
It's like he wants a rule book for life, and suddenly he realizes there isn't one.
And then Hudson enters the picture.
Oh, yeah, Hudson. Talk about a breath of fresh air, right? Or
Right.
maybe a
A hurricane.
yeah, more like a hurricane, actually. Like bursting in and turning Eli's carefully constructed world completely upside down.
You can just feel that energy, that tension between them.
Totally.
Eli, with all his walls and his need for control. And then you've got Hudson, who's just this ball of like pure, unadulterated life force.
It's like they're two sides of the same coin, you know?
Right. And that road trip to Cape Cod,
Oh, man. Talk about a recipe for disaster.
you just know it's going to be a wild ride.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because amidst all that chaos, that's when the author starts weaving in those recurring images. The lilies, the names, the power of memory.
Those lilies, though, they really stuck with me.
Oh, yeah. Why is that?
It's like they represent so much, you know? Like that whole meadow of lilies in Diana's painting, the lily that Kell is holding on to in the park, and then, of course, that childhood memory with the lilies by the creek. They're beautiful, but there's also this sense of, like, sadness, even decay, almost like a reminder that nothing lasts forever.
That's a great observation. I mean, lilies often symbolize mourning and remembrance, right? They kind of embody that bittersweet reality. Life is beautiful, but it's also temporary.
Totally. And then there's that whole thing with names,
Mm-hmm.
or, like, nicknames, I guess.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Eli.
Mm.
Shortened to the point, almost like he's trying to make himself smaller, less noticeable. And then Kell choosing a new name as she heads out west.
Reinventing yourself.
Exactly. And even Diana's daughter, Lily. It's like all these characters are grappling with identity, you know?
It's that existential question. Are we defined by the names we're given? Or do we get to choose who we want to be?
Exactly. And I think that's part of what makes this book so compelling. Like, it's asking us to think about those same questions in our own lives.
Right. And the way the author uses stream of consciousness.
Genius.
It's like we're right there in Eli's head, experiencing every doubt, every awkward encounter, every fleeting moment of self-awareness.
It makes you realize that even though he can be kind of a jerk sometimes, he's also just, like, human. Flawed, a little messed up, but trying to figure things out just like the rest of us.
Yeah.
It's like we're right there with him, rooting for him to, like, finally figure it out, even though we know it's probably going to be messy.
And that's what makes the ending so perfect, right?
Oh, tell me about it. Talk about a cliffhanger. So last we saw Eli, he was at the airport about to jet off to Ireland with Hudson.
Bold move. Right.
Right. Like, for a guy who spent the entire book avoiding anything that might make him feel something, this is huge. It begs the question, is he actually ready for this?
I know, right? It's like, can you really outrun your own baggage? Or will he just end up like, you know, a continent away, but still stuck in the same patterns?
And then there's Diana, choosing to stay in Philadelphia,
Yep.
facing the fallout of her divorce, trying to pick up the pieces of her life. I mean, talk about a contrast, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Two siblings at such different crossroads. And it really makes you think about choices, you know? Like, are we drawn to certain paths? Or do we actively choose
I
them?
mean, is there even a difference?
Right. Like, how much control do we actually have?
Exactly. It's like the author is like throwing those questions out there and letting us wrestle with them. Because let's be honest, there are no easy answers.
And that's the beauty of it, right?
It is. It's like you finish the book and you're still thinking about it. Like those characters, they stay with you.
Totally. And I think that's what makes a story truly great, you know? When it sparks something in you, when it makes you see the world, or maybe even just yourself in a different way.
100%. And I have a feeling, knowing our listeners, this book has definitely sparked some interesting thoughts.
Oh, for sure.
So as we wrap things up here, I'm curious, what will you take away from this deep dive into Left in Philadelphia? What resonated with you?
What will you carry with you from Eli and Diana's journey?
Until next time, keep asking the big questions. Keep searching for those authentic connections. And keep diving deep into the stories that remind us that, even in all the messiness, life is pretty darn beautiful.
Thank you for listening to the Kitsap Publishing Deep Dive Podcast. Emily Waters and I will see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.